Wow, it's wonderful to see everyone here. When I joined Microsoft, we had done a study on administrators and the differences between administering a Unix system. By the way, I've never told this story in public. The difference between what it took to administer a Unix system versus a Windows system. It was a devastating report. It said that there were a ton of things that you could automate in Unix that you could not automate in Windows, and that for the things you could automate in Windows, it took Windows admins, on average, 10 times longer to do it, using VB script and such. Devastating report. More horrific than that report was the response from the Windows management team, who said, "That's okay, Windows admins are really cheap." I was horrified, just horrified. PowerShell was, is, and always will be about you, about helping you become the heroes of your company, about helping you with your careers, and getting more money than those Unix guys. Okay. You know, I will tell you, nothing brings me more joy than to talk to you and to hear how our tools have helped you in your career. So if you have one of those stories, I'd love to hear it. So today, hopefully, I'm going to add a few more tools in your toolbox for how to advance your career. You already got a great one, PowerShell, but there's more to it. And hopefully, you know, I have made a lot of mistakes. I've got a lot of scar tissue. And frankly, I've done pretty well. So I'm going to share with you some of my tools. Now, your mileage may vary. Let me just acknowledge that, right? So what I'm going to talk about are a set of general principles, right? But then, you know, you could be going along great and there's an org change, right? You might have a crappy boss. You might be ready for promotion and then there's a reduction in force, right? Bad luck, reorganizations, lots of things will take the things that I'm talking about here and send them pear-shaped. But it doesn't change the general principles, okay? So first, a little bit about myself. I am a college dropout. When I was in college, I studied physics, philosophy, and beer drinking. And you know, I really have no formal education in computer science whatsoever. I did as all physics, philosophy dropouts did, with all physics, philosophy dropouts with bad hygiene and a terrible sense of fashion. I became a Unix admin. This is not a picture of me, but it really could have been. I didn't have that beard game going, but I swear to God, I had those pants and that shirt looks awfully familiar. So I had wonderful mentors at my companies, and they taught me the art of systems programming and administration. And I got a job at Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. I became DEC's youngest consulting engineer, right? That's sort of like the senior IC ranks. When I became a consulting engineer, another consulting engineer took me aside and he says, "Jeffrey, you now get to learn the motto." I said, "We got a secret motto?" He says, "Absolutely." I said, "What is it?" He says, "Often wrong, never uncertain." So good advice. So anyway, so that was about 30 years ago, and I've been a member of the senior IC community ever since. And what struck me is that as I've gone from DEC to IBM to Microsoft to now Google, what we look for and the path of senior ICs is amazingly consistent. Okay, so that's not entirely true. At various points, I convinced myself that to advance my career, I needed to become a manager. That didn't work out so well. You know, my passion was always in the technology, not in management. So it didn't last very long, but I learned a lot, and there's a lot to learn there. So again, my early career was focused in on system. Maybe you haven't seen this before. This is one of my favorites. It was focused on system and network management. And so I was recruited at Microsoft. There as a technical lead for all the management products and technologies, et cetera. Most people know me for inventing PowerShell. Not everybody knows that actually I got demoted when I went to work on PowerShell. I knew where the market was going. I knew what was needed, and they disagreed. So we agreed to disagree. I got to work on PowerShell, and they got to demote me. I'm not sure it worked out well. But I was right, and they were wrong. It took me 5 years to get my position back. By the way, it was deeply painful and embarrassing. I did not tell my friends, did not tell my family. Obviously, I had to tell my wife because it had a financial effect on us, and for 5 years, didn't know it was going to last that long. But it was really painful, okay? But I knew that this PowerShell thing was real and was important, and I had to do it. So anyway, after 5 years, I got my position back, and then more. I became a distinguished engineer. I became the chief architect of System Center and then Windows Server, and eventually technical fellow. I remember the day I got promoted to technical fellow, I called my wife and I said, honey, I got bad news. She said, what is that? She said, today my boss told me they'd never promote me again. You can't get promoted above technical fellow. So fun fact, fun fact. Turns out you were looking at the most inspirational technical fellow at Microsoft. No, it's true. It's true. Microsoft has about 250,000 employees. There were only 11 individual contributor technical fellows. These are people like Mark Russinovich, Jim Gray, Butler Lamson. 5 of these folks had Turing Awards. One of them had a Fields Medal. These are people who invented things like Ethernet. Engineers would look at them and just say, oh my gosh. And then they'd look at me, a dropout from the University of New Hampshire, and say, but if that schmuck can make it, I have a chance. Okay? So most inspirational. So as a member of, as a technical fellow, I got to participate in such as leadership team. I spent a lot of time understanding where the world was going, right? And it became clear to me that the world was going to be running on technology. Of course, that's obvious, but I mean, really at its most deep levels, right? And that in this world, right, errors we're going to cause problems and cost lives, right? So it really matters whether it works or not. Okay, so I also concluded that we had no idea how to run planetary scale software in a way that really worked. And so that's why I decided to leave my role as technical fellow at Microsoft and to apprentice myself in the art and science of SRE at Google, where I thought that they were the best at that. A little more complicated story than they're the best at it. But anyway, that's what I've been doing ever since. Now, again, I've been an IC for over 40 years and a senior IC for over 30. I've accumulated lots of scar tissue, right? The joke, right? Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. There you go. That's where your scar tissue comes from. But I've also participated in lots of promotion and career discussions, okay? So I thought I'd share with you a little bit of what I've learned from those, okay? So again, you've heard about the top 1%, yeah, top 1%. Well, as being one of the top 11 ICs in a company of 250,000, that is the top 0.05%, okay? So you would think that somebody that was in the top 0.5% would not have the imposter syndrome, that would have gotten over that. No. I deal with that shit every day. Every day, right? Every day I'm in a meeting, it's like, you don't belong here. What are you doing here? It's terrible. I call that voice the mean little bastard in my head, the MLB. Okay? And that little bastard never goes away, but I've learned how to manage it, right? And so first, let's start by acknowledging that there is some truth and usefulness in the imposter syndrome, okay? Now, your career advancement is going to be a function of 3 things: your capabilities, your ambition, and the choices and achievements that you make. I was once in a small little meeting with Steve Ballmer, and he said, any one of you in this room could be the next CEO of Microsoft. Satya wasn't in the room. And somebody sort of laughed about that. And he says, no, I want to be serious. If you're in this room right now, you have what it takes. You have the skill, you have the IQ, you have the capabilities to become the next CEO. But it takes more than that. It takes ambition and it takes commitment. He says, let me be clear, as you move up the ranks, there is no work-life balance. As CEO of Microsoft, there is no work-life balance, and there never will be. And most of you will look at that and say, hey, that's not a choice I want to make, and I respect that, and that's great. But if you have the ambition to go there, you got to understand that's what the deal is. Okay, so it takes more than just talent. You got to decide what level you want to get to, and it depends on your ambition and commitment. The next is, what does the system need? It took me a long time to get this in focus, right? What does the system need? So I started to get this in focus when I had been promoted to distinguished engineer. And after a while, I started to think, I wonder what it takes to get to technical fellow. So I talked to my boss and I said, hey, what does it take between, I'm not ready. And so that's not the conversation, but I'm just curious as to what it takes to get from here to technical fellow. And he said, yeah, that's not in the cards for you. I said, okay, why? He says, technical fellows are broad and you're very narrow, focused in on PowerShell and this management stuff. And so, you're just too narrow. I said, okay. He said, but you know what? Why don't you come be my chief architect for Windows Server, and that'll position you to, get the broad set of skills. I said, okay, that's great. And so I did that. Oh my God, what a step up job. I mean, just talk about the imposter syndrome kicking in, By the way, just to be clear, there have only been 3 chief architects for Windows Server, right? Dave frickin' Cutler, Bill frickin' Lang, and then myself, right? So stepping into that role was pretty darn scary. But after a while, I thought, hey, I kind of got the hang of this. And after a while, I thought, hey, I'm kind of doing pretty well here. And so I went to him and I said, hey, just kind of curious, in your mind, what does it take to get from here to there? To technical fellow. And he says, yeah, that's not in the cards for you. I said, okay, well, tell me about that. And he says, you're too broad. I am not making this up. He says, you're too broad. Technical fellows need to be narrow. Now, you might look at that and say, boy, that guy really freaking hated you, Jeffrey. But no, he didn't. The point was that the system had changed, right? The question was, what did the system need? When I first had that conversation with him, what the system needed was senior technical people that were broad in scope, that could combine things. Things had changed between then and the next time I had that conversation. And he said, and what the system needed, there were people that were deep and technical. Anyway, so I shifted gears and eventually got that. So that was great. Next is things that advance your career is luck. Luck plays an incredible role in your career. Okay, now I mentioned to you, Satya was not in that meeting. In fact, if you had taken, say, I'm bad with years, but say 5 years before Satya became CEO, and you took all the senior executives, all 200 plus of them, and put them in a room and said, okay, who's going to be the next CEO in this room, right? And you say, hey, these are the folks most likely to get it. These are the folks that may. Those folks, they're not going to make it. And guess where Satya would have been? Satya would have been in the bottom. Had no track record of success, really whatsoever. Really. Just take a look at stuff that worked on products that just generated no success. But he had been the head of Bing engineering, again, not particularly successful, at a time when we decided to get all in on the cloud, right? So Steve Ballmer fired Bob Muglia and gave that job to Satya. Lucky. He was in the right place at the right time. And then when Steve decided to leave, Satya was the right guy, had the right set of skills, etc. And then he got that role. And my belief is he's probably the world's best CEO. I mean, literally, like we've ever seen. He's that good. But let's go back to that. Less than 5 years later, I would have put him at the least likely, right? So it was a series of roles leading to capabilities and luck. Luck played an incredible amount of career in his incredible role in his career. And again, that's not taking anything away from him. Now, as I say, luck plays a huge role both in our lives and our careers. When I was a kid, I got hit by a car. I lived. I had appendix burst, rupture. I lived. Lucky. Also did some of my best work at companies that failed. I went Chapter 11. So unlucky. Okay. So you can take two engineers, right? Exactly the same capabilities, exactly the same skill set, etc. One of them's working on project A, and one of them working on project B. Sales team gets together and says, hey, let's put a sales quota on product B. Guess which engineer is going to have a better career path? Has nothing to do with them, has nothing to do with their contributions, has nothing to do with their skills, but because they're working on a project that the sales team has decided to incent, he is generating more business impact and therefore is going to have a faster career velocity. Luck. Luck just plays a huge role in our careers. So, back to the imposter syndrome, okay? When framed correctly, it really has a super positive energy and force to it, right? So the first thing is, if you have this, is to recognize you deserve your seat. Full stop. You deserve your seat. But it's also true that maybe a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen other people could have gotten that seat instead of you. And because of luck, etc. So what do you do with that? And my advice is, number 1, don't be arrogant. Number 2, use that insight to be humble, to be kind to others, to listen to them, to help them with their careers. And seen in this way, the best reaction to the imposter syndrome is kindness. And it's really quite a wonderful thing. Now, at most tech companies, there is this idea of we value ICs and individual contributors. And an individual contributor can make their way all the way up to the executive ranks. In fact, a Microsoft Technical Fellow was the equivalent of an executive at Microsoft. And as an executive, life is pretty good. Okay, got invited to some nice retreats, offsites, where they feed you lots of wonderful food and wine, etc. And so I got invited to that. I enjoyed it, and I looked around, and there's probably a group about this size. And I looked over there, and there's Mark Rosinovich, Technical Fellow. And I looked over there, and there was Butler Lamson, Technical Fellow. And I looked over there, there's another Technical Fellow. And it's like, who are all these non-technical fellows? The vast majority of them were not technical fellows. So here's a reality. Whereas we say, and it is true, that individual contributors can make their way all the way up to the senior ranks, as you map it as a percentage of the population of the ranks, here's what the world looks like. At the bottom levels, there are no managers as entry-level managers, right? They're all individual contributors. Then as you begin to go up, you start to get managers. But when you get to the top, you'll have a couple, and again, what was it? Like 11 individual contributor technical fellows. In that room, there was 200 to 300 executives, okay? The vast percentage of executives are not individual contributors, okay? Talking about things that change by level, as you grow in your individual contributor career, the things that matter change, okay? Technical skills are always a must, always, always, always. But as you rise up the ranks, there's a set of soft skills that you have to acquire, okay? Now, let me be clear, you can't skip the levels, right? You can't be like a junior engineer and say, oh, I've got great soft skills, make me a VP. Doesn't work that way. You got to get to be a junior engineer. You got to acquire the technical skills to get to senior engineer, from senior to principal, and move up the stack. But as you move up that stack, right, there's a set of skills. It's like, hey, they're a great technical person, but, whenever you're in a promo committee and you hear the word but, pay attention, because there's a general lesson there. And there's a lot of buts, where people are awesome, but they leave a lot of damage in their wake, etc. So how do I know that? My career really can be broken into 2 halves. The first half is when I just knew It was all about technology. We're engineers. The second half is when I figured out that it was really all about people. If you, in fact, took my reviews throughout my career, I should actually do this, but I'm sure this would be the case, and you took them and put it in half and did a word cloud of one and a word cloud of the second half, in the center of the first word cloud would be the word steamroller. I generated a lot of technical success, but at a pretty heavy cost. I would steamroller over folks, And then in the second half of my career, where I was far more successful, you would see the word collaborator, okay? So what are these soft skills? What are these people skills? And it's things like communications, right? Collaboration, teamwork, leadership without authority, influence. And again, you cannot get to those levels. Those things matter after you've achieved a certain level of proficiency, or rather, they're going to either accelerate or suppress your career growth at a certain level. At the lower levels, not so much, but then at some level, it really is either to dampen or accelerate your career. I do a lot of mentoring. Everyone I mentor is required to read this book. So you might want to take a picture of that. This is a very good book. Got it? All right. Phone's down. Oh. We'll wait for you, Alexander. I know, phones are hard. Okay, so as many of you, certainly I did, will face this choice. Hey, should I stick with my IC career path, or should I become a manager? So let's discuss that, right? Because what's important is, why are you choosing one path or the other? Okay, and what I like to say is it's like this game there used to be, where there's two ways to get this game wrong, right? You widen those, draw those bars apart, and this ball starts to roll up, and then if you get it right, you get up farther, and if you get it wrong, it stays lower. There's exactly two ways to get this wrong. One is to keep the two rods together, you get no movement, and the other is to move them to the end, and it just plops, right? And so what happens is, this is the way I like to think about this question of career versus passion. Okay, here's the thing about it, right? You got to do both, right? You got to pay attention to what fuels you, what gives you passion, and then also those things that are going to advance your career. And do we have Don Jones here? Don's not here. He's outside. Well, anyway, Don, freaking brilliant, right? Freaking brilliant. And he once framed it so beautifully. He said, every one of you, every day, needs to remember, you have two jobs: to do the task at hand, and to do the task at hand in a way that advances your career. They are distinct, different roles, and you got to keep both of those in focus. Okay? So again, same thing, passion versus advancing your career. Now here's the thing. Everyone knows you have bad days, right? Most of us know you have bad weeks. What people don't tell you is that both in life and in your career, you're going to have bad years, right? So when we were doing PowerShell, at some point there was Windows Vista, the Boofarama, right? It's actually the Longhorn reset was Boofarama. The entire Windows team turned against .NET, right? Instead of them saying, hey, we made mistakes, we made some crummy engineering decisions, they said, .NET's bad. And that became the hobbyists. And then they made our lives, Jim's life, my life, hell for years. I'm talking years, right? And but what was able to get me through those very difficult times was the fact that I just had incredible passion about the technology. I mean, it was such great technology. I knew it was great technology. And that's what gets you through. If you'd been doing it just for your career, I definitely would have bailed. So back to this thing about balancing IC versus manager. If you got passion for being a manager, that's where you should go. But if you have passion for ICs, you probably want to stay on the IC path. Because again, at some point, you're going to have a couple years where it really sucks. By the way, fun fact, it wasn't fun actually. After we had shipped, I got invited to one of these executive retreats, and another executive from the .NET team says, "Hey, Jeffrey, things have really changed for you." I said, "Yeah, they have." He says, "You were a pariah for years." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "We were rooting for you." I said, "I didn't know that." So it was true. I mean, it really actually hurt, that they had been rooting for us, and then they didn't tell us that. And so I felt really quite alone. So if you see somebody struggling, reach out and tell them that. So the conclusion is everybody should become a manager. Wait, what? Indeed, I want to, my advice is that if you want to become a senior IC, you should definitely take a role as a manager at some point. Don't stay in that role, but you definitely want to do it. Why? And the answer is senior ICs partner with executives to get things done. If you do not understand that role, if you don't understand the pressures, if you don't understand that job, you're not going to be as an effective a collaborator. When you understand the pressures that they're under, you know what you can push and say, "Hey, we really need to just push through this," and other ones where you need to know when to shut the hell up because you're not helping. So now let's talk about a tough topic, right? We all have apex levels, okay? This level is the top level we're ever going to attain, right? Chances are there's a good chance. No, maybe not a good chance. There's a chance somebody in here will be the next CEO of Microsoft. Satya's been around for a while and probably bring in an external one. Maybe not, though. Everybody's got their level. Hey, what about the level right underneath Satya? Oh, odds go up, but still pretty hard tasks. So we all have certain top level that we're going to get, right? And again, this is based upon capabilities, ambitions, and opportunities. Okay? At every company I've been to, right, whether it's DEC, IBM, Google, Microsoft, there's a very clear line between the bulk of the engineering community and the senior IC community. And that bridge that you have to get over, I'd say that less than 5% of the engineers ever make it across that bridge. Some of us go the other path, come back again, goes both ways. But in crossing that chasm, companies all look for the same three things. The first, technical twinkle. Technical twinkle is the thing that you do, and other engineers look at it and say, "Damn, I wish I had thought of that." When people saw the object pipeline, they're like, "God damn it, that's so obvious once it's there." It wasn't there for the last 40 years, but once you see it, it's sort of obvious. Oh, right? Like that Far Side cartoon where the caveman is there and in front of all of his cave people, they all have like elk on their shoulders. And he says, "With the amazing knife, you only need to wear the skins of the animals." It's like, oh, damn, that's such a great idea. This bear is really heavy. Anyway, so technical twinkle. Or it can be that as an individual contributor, you can solve a class of problems that 10 other people as principal engineers couldn't, okay? The next is business impact, right? It's not about being just a smart person. It's about being a smart... There's a difference between great technology and great technology that brings in $1 billion of revenue, okay? So back to that thing. Hey, sales revenue, sales incentive, they're going to do better. And then lastly, it's can you be a member of that community? Big things get done at companies when senior people work across organizations to get things done. And so they're looking for that, right? Other way to say this is, no jerks, okay? Now, some people get across that line without passing that bar, but in general, that's it. So I mentioned, technical twinkle, business impact, community, but to us, those are really kind of abstract ideas. So I thought I'd give some examples to help get things in focus, right? One of the most impactful conversations, two conversations I ever had were with my boss at Tivoli. Okay, that was IBM. Boss says to me, brings me into his office one day and he says, "Jeffrey, I need more output from you." I said, "Okay." He said, no, you don't get it. He says, "You're already the smartest, hardest working guy I got. And if you just work harder, you hear all the time, if you just work harder, maybe I'll get 10 or 15% more from you because you don't have much more to give. He says, but I don't need 10 or 15% more. I need 10 to 15 times more output. He says, in fact, give me 20 times more output. I said, Tom, what the hell are you talking about? He says, you're a smart guy, figure it out. I thought, oh my God. I went back to my office thinking Tom was setting me up to get fired, which didn't make any sense because he really liked me. So I was like, what the hell is he talking about? And so I chewed on this, like, how can I give 20 times more output? But I realized that my job was all about amplification. There's only so much I could do, but if I could amplify the results of our 1,000 engineers, I could give them 20x more output. So that was a pivot point in my career. And when you view your job as amplification, amplifying the work of others, all of a sudden it then aligns you with helping them be successful, right? Because you can't be successful unless they're successful, right? So you help that. And also it widens your aperture of the tools to be done, right? So instead of saying, oh, I got Visual Studio, I just need to write code, it's like, wait a second, what kind of code do I need to write? Do I need to write libraries? Do I need to write frameworks? Do I need to write something so that we provide the parser so that all these people that got a D in their parsing class don't have to write a parser for their commandlets? Okay, what type of code? Or, hey, do I need culture or inspiration? What does it take? The second most important career I ever had, again, the same guy, takes me out to lunch and he says, Jeffrey, I got a problem with you. I said, again. He says, I said, what is it? He says, no, don't get me wrong. Again, you're doing great. He says, my problem is that, you're working on a product that every time I sell it, I earn $15,000. And you're not working on a product that every time I sell it, I earn $5 million. So my question to you is, do you want to be relevant? Wow. What a question. The product that I've been working on was my baby, right? It's my idea. I had done it at Digital. I took it and brought it to this company. I brought my team to the company. I had incredible passion for this. But there he was telling me I wasn't having any business impact and therefore was not relevant. And so I had a hard choice to make. And I decided I wanted to be relevant. And that then led me to getting on Microsoft's radar screen and the rest is history. So now I want to talk about this idea of mentors, sponsors, and supporters, right? Often we talk about these things and we get them jumbled up. So I want to be precise about these things. These play important roles in your careers. So it's important to get in focus what they are and what the roles are. And the key thing is who makes change? Who makes change, right? So when you have a mentor does not make any changes. Mentor provides you some feedback and you make the changes, okay? It's important to get mentors. I never did that. It's really important to get mentors. Next, supporters, right? These are people who advocate, right? They'll be the cheerleaders, right? I remember at some point, Mark Arsinovich was a supporter of mine and he came to me and said, Jeffrey, what the F? I said, what do you mean? He says, just had a technical fellow review board and I was all ready to say yes and make the case for why you should be promoted to technical fellow and your boss didn't put your name up. So I can't put your name up. I can only support you. By the way, that was the conversation that led me to say, hey boss, what's it take? And he's like, yeah, it's not in the cards. So Mark was a supporter, right? Not a mentor, not a sponsor. And then the sponsor actually makes changes, right? So I've been a sponsor for a number of people. There you actually create opportunities. You get them assigned projects. You get them projects. You create the support for them, et cetera. And so it's important to understand these various things. Now, I mentioned to you that the first half of my career was focused in on tech. The second half was focused in on people. That's a very common pattern for senior ICs, okay? But here's what that means. That means that senior ICs are very eager to help people coming up in their career paths, right? So a lot of people will look and say, oh, well, I know you're busy, blah, blah, blah. They won't ask these folks to be mentors. That's a mistake. You should be reaching out to senior people and asking them to mentor you, and they are going to be eager to do so if you're a good mentee. Okay. Now, just to be clear, if all these people come and go to 11 technical fellows and ask for mentoring, that is a scheduling problem. But in general, you should lean into that. You should ask. Okay. So modular scheduling, they'll definitely do it. Now, what does it take to be a good mentee? Good mentee comes prepared. It's not like a hangout, let's have coffee, blah, blah, blah. Mentee says, hey, here's where I am. Here's where I'd like to be. Here's the challenges that I've had. Do you have some perspective on those challenges? Step number 2, you get some perspective on those challenges. Next time you discuss, you say, hey, here's what I heard, here's what I've done, and here's where I am. You do the work, okay? And if you do those 2 things, people love to mentor people and help them with their careers. Okay, last topic, the conversation, okay? At various times, you're going to find yourself in a position where you say, hey, doesn't feel right, doesn't feel fair. Like it feels like I shouldn't be here, I should be there. At this point, you got to have the conversation, the crucial conversation. This is hard, and it is critical that you don't screw it up. It's very easy to screw this up. I've seen a lot of people just derail their careers by screwing up this conversation. Okay, so number 1, don't make demands. Don't make ultimatums. I've seen people do both and get fired as opposed to getting promoted. Okay, so it's important to get the tone right on these things. Now, what I do is I teach people a particular mindset that has worked for me and is a very effective mindset. And it's a mindset I call joint problem solving, right? Now, let's go back to disagreements. It's grounded in René Descartes. René Descartes, Discourse on Method, looked and he said, everywhere I look, I see discontent. Tall people that wish to be short, short people that wish to be tall, fat people that wish to be thin, thin people that wish to be fat. Everywhere there's discontent, except in one area. And that is your ability to perceive and hold the truth. So if we're all good at exactly one thing, the ability to be right, how is it that we can have so many disagreements? And when you pull on the thread, it really came down to one of 3 things. A difference or misalignment on objectives, differences in objectives, differences in data, or differences in method. Okay? So whenever you find yourself in conflict, in general, it's going to be one of those things. And so when faced with conflict, respond with curiosity. Don't pull the steamroller trick. Don't try and win. Try and understand. So curiosity. Oh, let's talk about objectives. Are our objectives aligned here? What are your objectives? What are my objectives? And then what data are you looking at? And how are you processing it? So often when I'm in a conflict situation like this, I'll say, hey, you know what? I think I would like to get to this level. We align there. Any disagreements? Is there anything that makes you say, hey, you don't want me to get to the next level? Nobody's going to say they don't want you to get to the next level. So, okay, so we're aligned on objectives. And now, here's the data. I'm looking at this, 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 and this, and this. And here's how I think about it. This, this, and this, and this. And therefore, I think, based upon what I'm looking at and the way I process it, I sort of think I should be promoted. How are you looking at it? Do you see different data? Is there something I'm missing? Have I thought about it wrong, et cetera? And then all of a sudden you'll learn all sorts of crazy shit like, oh, you're not as good as you think, or that project didn't go as well as you thought, or this crazy idea of like, well, hey, you're rocking it, but there's this thing we call business need. Business need, what's that mean? That means, yeah, you could get promoted if I could make the business case for it, but I can't make the business case for it because I've already got a technical fellow, and we can't have 2. It's like, oh, so that means I have to leave if I want to be technical fellow? Yeah. Like, oh, okay, great. Should have told me that a couple years ago. So anyway, so that's the conversation, right? The conversation. Again, don't get it wrong. Don't get it wrong. Go in there with curiosity. Don't even go in there with the goal of trying to, change your position. Like that sets you up for failure. It really does. Go in there to say, hey, obviously I've misunderstood something. Let's see if I can understand what that misunderstanding is. And then you can take that and go back to strategize, okay? So again, tone's so important in this. By the way, so that fun conversation. So when it came around for the next round of, hey, I think I'm ready for technical fellow, I went and said, sort of had that conversation. It's like, hey, here's what I've done, da-da-da. And the phrase I used was, when I look at it, just doesn't seem like the books are balanced, right? The accounting's not right here. And they looked and said, you know what? You're right. And so they were going through the package. And at some point in that process, I wish I could remember what it was, but some weakness, some flaw of mine got raised in the conversation. And so I remember talking to Scott Guthrie about this. I said, hey, Scott, I'm just kind of curious. How do you think about this issue, which is a legitimate issue? How do you think about that? Does that negate my opportunity? And he thought about it for a while. He's quiet. He says, Jeffrey, we don't promote people based upon their lack of weakness. Wow, that's pretty good. And I got promoted. So anyway, the point of that being that the conversation helped me and it helped him. So again, I want to be clear on this. The future of the world is going to run on technology, right? It's going to run on clouds, it's going to run on private clouds, it's going to run on tech. This is a world where, software making errors, getting it wrong is going to destroy lives. And that technology is not created by managers. Managers are not writing the code. Managers are not keeping the systems up. This is a world that is grounded in the contributions of this community, the community of individual technical contributors. And I hope that you all prosper wildly with the tools that we have given you, and hopefully with the new tools I put in your toolbox today. I wish you the best.